Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today we have with us Tiago Borges Coelho. Tiago is serial entrepreneur, always connected with technology. He's also a filmmaker, and these are only two of his facets. So he has many more jobs and many more activities. Truly a multi-role person. So, Tiago, you are in Mozambique. Um, Maybe a Western look may tend to think about Mozambique as a subdeveloped country, but the things have been evolving quite fast lately. So, Tiago, there are sometimes preconceptions about where technological and scientific entrepreneurship are born and how they can thrive and make long-term changes. Has this been your experience as a serial social entrepreneur, researcher, and developer of IT services in Mozambique?
Uh, I thanks for having me. Yeah, it's true that historically we've always had industrial and technological clusters throughout the developed world, right? I think they are a byproduct of economic stability, your capacity to invest, your access to education. But I would argue that nowadays this no longer needs to be the case. If a certain innovation has a universal quality, it can thrive anywhere. Inversely, if it is well localized, it will also thrive regionally. And in both cases, it does have the potential of making long-term changes, which can be good or bad, unfortunately, right? But in my own personal experience in Mozambique, although we're one of the poorest countries in the world, this is not an impediment to technological and scientific entrepreneurship. Actually, it can be argued that this is a fertile place for it, as because you guys know that necessity drives ingenuity. And because our economy is dominated by the informal sector, we have no other thing to do but to survive. So we have to become entrepreneurial. So relating to technologies, most people don't know that Mozambique actually piloted the precursor to one of the most impactful innovations for the financial sector in the development world. I'm talking, of course, about mobile money. So a year before Safaricom in Kenya launched the M-Pesa service, MCell, the Mozambican network operator, actually implemented the first authorized airtime credit swapping system. And this led to the creation of the mobile money product. What's interesting that I find is that to tie your question about where entrepreneurship is born and where it can thrive, for me, the interesting thing is that this innovation that we regard as being very African, the mobile money, was actually made possible because of an investment from the Department for International Development from the UK that the FI did, because they were the ones funding the initial research. So what I would argue is that where is not the important factor. Investment actually is. And so it makes sense that countries or regions that can afford to invest in entrepreneurship are also the ones that make it thrive. So what I mean to say is that we need more investment in order to have more entrepreneurship.
The project that is boosting or powering these talks that we are doing, the Talknologies, the AI Nanotech, is pretty much focused on artificial intelligence. This is currently an international hot topic. How does it work in Mozambique? What place does it occupy in your country, and what type of positive or negative impact can it have, or is it is already having in Mozambique?
Yeah, well, first off, I think I would argue that this is a hot topic because I think artificial intelligence became a buzzword. And I think in many cases, this generates more confusion than clarity. So what I would rather do is to kind of deconstruct it and focus on artificial intelligence as a subset of data science techniques. So I would rather focus on techniques rather than just the general term of AI. And if we do this, if we look at just the techniques, we can look, for example, how recommendation algorithms impact the lives of Mozambicans. So let's talk specifically about YouTube. They use recommendation algorithms, and in Mozambique, we have roughly 7 million internet users. And when I go into YouTube and I look at the top six queries on YouTube for Mozambique, they are music, movie, musics, movies in the plural, movie dubbed in Portuguese, and movies dubbed in Portuguese with subtitles. So if you look at these search terms, they're very general. So what is a recommendation algorithm supposed to do when you have such a general approach to accessing content, right? And I think this is funny because we actually when you start talking to people about how they use, for instance, YouTube, I had a guy that once told me, "Oh, I know YouTube. YouTube is the place where I see Rambo movies." Because what happened? He went into YouTube, he typed in movies, and then he saw a movie with a person that he identified, Sylvester Stallone, but here he's known as Rambo. And then he started watching the movie, and then he started getting recommendations for more Rambo movies. And at a point, he actually said, "Well, I actually finished YouTube because I saw all the things that they had with." Is that when you have this general approach to, we're a country with very low digital literacy, right? So when people have this general approach and they find something and then they just have this repetition, all the recommendations are around that, then we create a sort of cognitive dissonance, right? We don't see anything else. We're just focused on the Rambo movies. So for him, YouTube was actually a platform for Rambo movies. And the interesting there, for me, the interesting thing there is that this shows how AI is inherently biased towards people in the developing world, because we have other ways of thinking. We're not so easily put into these little groups. So I think we present a big challenge for AI, because we are the type of users that do not conform to how these systems are built. And I think this makes countries like Mozambique very interesting case studies to look at AI. But then another thing that this can bring, aside from this kind of comedic way that people can look at how artificial intelligence actually doesn't work for us, you can look at it in a way that's way more impactful. Because if you look at AI not from the point of servicing a user, but for the point of servicing a purpose, what you realize is that you can do really life-changing things in Mozambique and in Africa in general. I'll give you a concrete example. So in Togo, there's this company, Novisi, and what they did is they started using machine learning and geospatial analytics and mobile phone metadata to find a way that they can provide social security money for the most vulnerable people. So what they did is they used high resolution imagery to figure out where are the settlements of people that have the poorest money. So we know that poor people here build houses in different ways, in specific ways. So by training a machine to identify where are these poor households, they could also find out where are the people that live in these households. They have mobile phones. So how much they're spending with their mobile phones. And the ones that spend the less are usually the ones that cannot afford it. So they started sending mobile money directly to these users, no questions asked. And if you think about it, it's amazing, because you have built a system that can identify the poorest among the poor, and you can actually have a direct impact on their livelihoods by providing them social income, right? And I think this kind of shows that we are a fertile place to test absolutely amazing approaches to artificial intelligence, provided that we can look at AI as a problem-solving tool and not as a money-generating tool.
And so we can have an artificial intelligence that becomes more real and down to earth and paying attention to the real problems of the people on the ground. You mentioned social problems. You are also a social entrepreneur, and social entrepreneurship tends to be seen as a non-profit venture and often associated to emerging markets where these benefit from important solutions, not always linked with real problems that are that people are having in those countries. What is the difference between importing technological solutions and developing them at a local level?
Yeah, I think on the first side of your statement, I think social entrepreneurship, although it's seen as something that's more nonprofit, I believe that it should be for profit. The only difference is that we place people above the money, right? So I think there are a lot of profitable opportunities in social entrepreneurship, especially because you're building capital up. So you're empowering people so they can have more purchasing power, and then they're going to become consumers of your product and consumers that love what you did because you helped them arise. Should we be importing or developing technologies locally? I actually tried both things. So when we started, we developed a job board here in Mozambique. So we picked up an idea from abroad, job boards where you can publish vacancies and people can apply to those vacancies. And the business model is relatively straightforward. You charge companies to put their job ads there, and then you let users access these opportunities and apply them for free. What we realize is that we soon, very quickly in the first 2 or 3 years, we hit the glass ceiling. So there were only enough job opportunities here and only enough people with access to the internet that could actually benefit and become our users. So what we realize is that we need to create access to jobs system that first doesn't use the internet, and then secondly, it's not based on the formal market, because in Mozambique, for instance, you have a labor force of 14 million people, but you only have 1 million jobs. So for each person that gets a job, there's 13 people that can never get the opportunity to have a steady income coming from the job. So what do? They live in this survival economy where they have to become entrepreneurial and do small gigs and try to survive out of the work that they can produce. So we decided to create a platform that was built in Mozambique for Mozambique, meaning we use technology that doesn't require internet. We use the same technology as M-Pesa, where you, with a basic phone, you can dial a free short code and you can push information and receive information. And this allowed us to register workers. And then we focused on the gig economy. So carpenters, electricians, everyone that has a skill could register in this platform. And what we saw is that we grew way faster, and the transaction value of our informal labor market platform, the one that doesn't use the internet, is way bigger than from the formal side, because you have more people transacting more things and requesting more jobs. So what I think is you absolutely need to look at the social idiosyncrasies, let's call them, from where do you want to serve your product, and you should build on that. I think you're much more likely to be successful if you're building something for the user base that you're trying to service, rather than bringing something and trying to adapt it to this reality.
Coming back to artificial intelligence, what do you believe that are the major challenges for AI and other technological endeavors in geographically distant locations in a world that is globally connected, but where there are different levels of market requirements?
Okay, so for me, the major challenge is for AI to find funding opportunities for research that go beyond the purpose of monetization. I think that's the biggest challenge on how can you see more AI-driven projects across Africa, because it's AI is very specialized, as you know. It's a field of computer science that requires a level of specialization that unfortunately it's beyond the capacity for most people to do all the training and to have access to the tools that you need to actually test your models, to use machine learning, and etc. So I think the question here is, although the world is connected, so for me, this geographical distancing is not an issue anymore. The world is still very divided in terms of their access and their financial capability to access mainstream research, like doing stuff with AI and other data science techniques. So the thing here is, I don't see even the market becomes a challenge when, because like we discussed, AI is so driven towards the purpose of monetizing something. How do you monetize someone that's poor? You don't, right? Because they don't have anything to give you. So the only thing you can do is to hope to improve their livelihoods so they can eventually become what everybody says it's the next billion users or consumers. So I think AI could play a fundamental role in eradicating poverty, for instance, in the sense that it could use a lot of techniques to derive a lot of insights that could then create a more equitable access to, like I explained before, to social funds, or to better jobs, or to better career tips, or whatever it is. But the big difference here is that the developing world, countries like Mozambique, we lack the financial capacity to be attractive for these big companies to invest on. But at the same time, since they want to acquire more users, I don't think they want to become the Rambo for the platform for Rambo movies, like I was jokingly talking about YouTube. So I think it's in their best interest to invest more in understanding these peculiarities of how we use technology and how we can become an interesting source of examples to improve recommendation algorithms or other data science techniques.
Just speaking on what you were just saying, one of the main advantages of AI is at least theoretically, is the ability to learn. And what do AI and other technological solutions have to gain by merging viewpoints and knowledge that they get from emerging markets such as Mozambique and more technologically developed markets?
Well, I have two words for that: selection bias. So we know that in order to let's say train these machines to come up with insights, or to with these recommendations, what we're doing is we're creating a selection bias. What we choose to train them, it's going to bias them towards the results. So what can you learn from emerging markets? You can expand your selection. You can expand the points that you can use to actually train these machines. So I think developing markets are way more challenging, because for once you have lower levels of education, but you also have, for instance, in Africa you have 54 countries, but we speak more than 2,000 languages in Africa. So, does if diversity is interesting to build a more robust AI system, then you will find more diversity and more ways of thinking in emerging countries, because we were simply not formatted as the developed world is, and we don't conform to the rules and to the norms and to these biases that the developed world already has. So I would argue that we would be the fertile ground countries in Africa, and Mozambique in specifically would be a fertile ground to provide more diversity of data that can eventually lead to more robust, more inclusive, and more fair AI solutions.
So today we had with us Tiago Borges Coelho, a serial social entrepreneur with a very strong IT connection. So thank you so much for bringing us some stark and vivid examples on how technology is supporting the change for the better in a country like Mozambique. And we hope for the best in your next and future endeavors. Thank you so much, Tiago.
Thank you so much.